Imam Mustafa, so happy to have you join us today.
A pleasure.
Now, I picked up your book a few days ago, and I was really impressed by it, just going through the pages and seeing, I bought it for my son, and I could see that you've put a lot of work into this. It's almost like a textbook, right?
Yes.
And you put a lot of work into it. I see boxes with different details like stories and background information to the Quran for kids. Tell me a little bit about the process of writing this book.
Okay, so I have to start with the original translation of the Clear Quran, which was completed back in 2014 and 15. So this translation was mainly for adults. And I've realized over the years, Islamic schools have started to use the translation for students grade 5 and up. So I thought maybe we should do something for grades 4 and below, or 5 and below. Mm-hmm. And I started to work with a big team of young students between the ages of 7 to 12. And my son Ziad and other kids, about 50 kids were involved in the making of the book. So they made sure that all the words are easy to understand. And of course, we filled the book with stories, tons of stories to explain verses and chapters, and also illustrations that were done professionally by Noor Kids. Mm-hmm. So this is why I think this book is unique, because it's done from the perspective of kids. So other translations were done before, but to the best of my knowledge, no kids were involved. So I think this is the first translation where you have actual real kids involved in the making of the book.
Yeah, it's amazing that you managed to have, as you said, 50 kids. Where'd you find them?
Well, I help with, I give talks at different Islamic schools. I work for Main Gate Islamic Academy. I go to Olive Grove, Isna, Al-Falah, Safa al-Marwa. So I go to these different Islamic schools, mainly in the GTA. Mm-hmm. So I get questions from students, and I know their struggle when it comes to studying Quran translations and, dealing with the old translations for kids. I'll tell you a quick story. Back in 2016, I believe, there was this publisher from Singapore who was coming to attend the RIS here in Toronto. And he gave me an example of a book, a Quran translation for kids that he was working on. When I looked, I said, dude, it looks fantastic. I see the rainbows, I see the flowers and everything. But when I read the translation, it was none other than Yusuf Ali from 1934. Mm-hmm. Thou, and all that stuff, verily, and all. I said, dude,
language is a bit complicated.
Yeah, you lost your mind. Even college graduates can't understand this stuff. Mm-hmm. You have to, to make the language easy for students to understand. So alhamdulillah, I managed to put together a big team of students from different Islamic schools to help with this project.
Mm-hmm. Now I want to ask you about translation. How did you get into translation? Because what I understand is that you came from Egypt.
Yes.
You were born and raised in Egypt, so you went through the Egyptian schooling system.
Yes.
Which probably, I'm guessing the English language instruction wasn't that fantastic, and yet here you are doing translation, right? Which is a very sophisticated sort of, you have to have a very sophisticated understanding of English to be able to do that, right?
Well, I'm doing my best.
How'd you get there? What sort of process did you take?
Well, I was not supposed to go to school.
Really?
Yes. So I grew up in a small village in Egypt, and just like the rest of the people in the village, we didn't have a school. And my dad wanted me to just stick around and work in the village just like the rest of the family. But my mom, she put up a big fight for me. So I had to walk 1 hour one way to school and 1 hour at the end of the day. And I studied Islam in Arabic, and I memorized the Quran at the age of 12. So I graduated high school, and I went to Al-Azhar University to study Islam in English and translation. But my English was horrible because in high school, we didn't have the best English teachers. So for example, they taught us to say stomach instead of stomach. Mm-hmm. Appearance instead of experience, deliquous instead of delicious. So first couple of years in college, it took me like 2 years to unlearn the horrible pronunciation I had learned in high school. Mm-hmm. And I started to listen to the BBC, read Shakespeare, and do language exchange sessions with some Muslims, new Muslims in Cairo. And alhamdulillah, I picked it up. I think my mom is making lots of dua prayers for me.
So you learned English English in Al-Azhar University.
Yeah, after the age of 20.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's when you started learning English.
Yes.
And that's when, and then I guess you did your BA, and then you completed your MA, and then your PhD also in languages and translation at
Yes,
Azhar,
and I
right?
started to teach at the university Islamic studies in English.
So when did you start getting interested in translating the Quran?
So it's a long story because in college I studied different interpretations of the Quran in Arabic and how the Quran is translated into English, and I was familiar with the challenges that people face when they translate the Quran and the general public when they read the Quran. First of all, most of the translations were done in Old English. Yusuf Ali, Pickthall, and many others, even Asad, and even some new translations like the Study Quran and so on and so forth. Because we as Muslims, or many of us, we have this, I believe, the false assumption that the translation has to be very complicated and very archaic to give it the King James touch, to make it sound holy and sacred. But Allah says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ. We have made the Quran easy to read, understand, and remember. So why do you make it so difficult, dude? Make it easy, because it has to be accessible to the general, public.
Otherwise, no one's going to read it.
Yes, to Muslims and non-Muslims. And this is why many people, they don't go past page 3 when they read the Quran in old, complex, archaic English. And this is why I decided to make it accessible. The other challenge was many of those who translated the Quran were not actually qualified to translate. Of course, it's very interesting to know that for 1,300 years after the passing of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Quran was never translated into English by a Muslim, mostly by missionaries and Orientalists. And this is why you still see words in translation like jihad, like holy war, and infidels. We don't have this in the Quran in Arabic, but it was translated by non-Arabs and non-Muslims and people who were not qualified to translate. For someone to be qualified, they have to study translation, they have to know, they have to be a native speaker either of Arabic or English, and to have good mastery over the other language as well. And they have to study different things, Quranic studies and this and that. So it's a big thing. And I've never seen a holy book that is not translated by someone who is qualified, that is widely accepted in the community, except in the Muslim community. You will never find the Old Testament translated by someone who is like anyone who is not qualified, and you will never find the Jewish community fully accepting and celebrating this translation. The same thing for the New Testament. Only in the Muslim community you will find many people who are not qualified. They want to do it, alhamdulillah, maybe they have good intentions, but you're not qualified to do it. So let those who are qualified do it, So I'm not going to dwell on this, but for someone to pick up a good translation of the Quran, the first thing is they have to see if the translator is qualified or not. Because otherwise, some translations do a big disservice to the Quran because of mistranslations. And these translations are used against Islam because they see mistranslations, contradictions in the book. But this is not what the Arabic says. So you have to pick a reliable translation of the Quran, like the Clear Quran, for example.
For example.
For example.
Tell me about the pictures in your book, because you've, it's unusual for a Quran translation to have pictures in it, and I see a bunch of them, including human beings.
Yes.
Why did you decide to include pictures?
Well, most people are visual learners like myself. So when I studied at Al-Azhar in Egypt, these, dry topics, philosophy and mantiq, logic and history and stuff, we didn't have pictures. So I used to draw or illustrate these lessons to sum them up in one illustration. And I realized I should do the same thing with this book, because most of young students, they mainly like two things. They like stories, especially funny stories, and we have tons of them in this book, and also illustrations. Because, students, so they watch lots of Disney Plus, they watch Netflix, video games, and so on and so forth. So they see the graphics and, this glamour and the design. And now when you come to the Quran translation book, it's very dry, old English, no illustrations. What is this, man? What is this? So, you have to be competitive in the way you present the Quran to students, as long as we're not doing anything wrong. This is a creative way of presenting the Quran to students. Yeah.
Imam Khattab, I also noticed that you included some difficult questions that kids have asked and answers to those questions. Like, for example, are there women prophets, right? And does things about God as well that kids might be curious about.
Yeah, kids are inquisitive. They always ask good questions.
Yeah.
And sometimes these questions are very challenging even to teachers and parents. Like if they ask who created God, how do we know that Allah exists?
Why do bad things happen?
To
right?
good people,
to good
yes.
people, yeah.
And if God creates perfectly, how come my friend has a disability, and so on and so forth. If I ask these questions growing up in the village in Egypt, my dad will say, "Get out of my house, you're not my kid anymore." So basically, if we don't answer these questions, our kids grow with the perception that Islam is weak, Islam doesn't have the answers. Islam does have the answers. The fact is, some people don't know the answer. So I try to put these questions throughout the book. Wherever there is a relevant verse or a chapter that deals with these questions, I put the question and the answer, and maybe along with a story, and I explained it in a very logical way the kids can understand.
So what are your future plans? Are you planning to write more books for kids?
Well, I'm finalizing a Quran dictionary because the majority of Muslims don't speak Arabic. I would say that 85% of Muslims are not Arab. So we have to make the Quran accessible in Arabic to non-Arab Arabic speakers. So basically, I've been working on this dictionary since 2017. So if someone studies this book for about 4 months, give or take, they will be able to understand everything in the Quran in Arabic without realizing on translation. So once I finish this, I'm going to take on the rest of the Quran, because this is one portion of the Quran from chapter 49 to 114. So once this is done,
I'm going to surahs. It's primarily
short chapters. Yes, 67 in total. The number of chapters, which is these chapters are usually memorized and studied by young students. So this is why I focused on them. So the next step would be to do a transition between this one for kids and the adults version. So it's going to be like an intermediary level. We're not going to have as many stories and illustrations in that book to be able to put the whole Quran in one volume. It's going to be around 1,000 pages or something.
Okay, amazing. Imam Khattab, where can people buy this book, The Clear Quran for Kids?
You can go to our website, theclearquran.org, and you will find this cover on the website, on the main page. You click it, it will take you inside, and it will show you where you can buy a copy in the US, in Canada, and the UK. And it is sold like individual copies and bulk for schools and teachers for a cheaper price.
Thank you for your wonderful work, Imam Khattab. May God bless it and help you to be successful in all that you do.
Thank you. A pleasure.